So, for those that were here last month, hopefully you remember Brock Blake. He did a great interview, and he shared this principle that really stuck with me. A little ways into it, they were asking him about like raising money and like whether that was helpful. And he's like, on one hand, it was awesome. On the other hand, we kind of got comfortable and we did this thing called playing business. And what he meant by that was, he's like, well, we spent a long time working on our logo and, we spent a long time working on our business cards and our website and like, you know, running the lines for like our phone system and stuff like that. And the way that I would sum it up is that playing business is basically anything that keeps you from making money. So it's kind of like my son Lincoln likes to play Legos, right? And my daughters used to like to play house, but like as entrepreneurs, we do not want to get stuck playing business. Maybe when you're little, that's cool, but like as entrepreneurs, not cool. So with that in mind, just want to share an example. Who knows who this is? Darren. Yes. Okay. So Reed Hastings, kind of a popular guy. He's one of the co-founders and the CEO of Netflix, which a lot of people spent many, many hours on Netflix during COVID. And so what I wanted to share with you is that it was around 2002, right after Netflix went public. They went public pretty short after they started. Reed really wanted to focus on their culture. He's a big culture guy. And so he got together with his team and they built what's called the Netflix culture deck. Some of you may have heard about this. It's pretty popular. It's about it's a little over 120 slides, so it's fairly substantial. Here's 3 of the slides. I don't know if you can read it, but here's 3 slides out of it, just so you can get a taste of what was in there. So I'll just kind of read through these and give some commentary. This is like slide number 26. It says, like every company, we like to hire well, which is not a weird slide at all. Everyone should like to hire well. But then he goes on to say, but unlike many companies, we practice adequate performance gets a generous severance package. Or in other words, if you're mediocre, we don't want you at Netflix. So that's pretty hardcore, right? He goes on to say, we're a team, not a family. We're like a pro sports team, not a kids recreational team. Sometimes, companies coddle their employees and they're like, it's okay. Netflix is not one of those companies. The coach's job at every level of Netflix is to hire, develop, and cut smartly so that we have stars in every position. Okay. So you can see here, just from these 3 slides, kind of the like what Netflix is all about. And for those that have heard about it, they're very cutthroat, right? It's a very competitive culture. And so, so Reed would sit down with new hires, right? Netflix is growing, but he felt this was so important. He would sit down with a new hire right after they were hired and go through this whole deck with them, right? Which is a good way to kind of get everybody on board with the culture. But what he found is that some employees were like, yes, this is awesome, right? Go Netflix. Some employees were like, are you kidding me? Like, what did I just sign up for, right? They didn't know what they were getting themselves into. And so what he wanted to do is that he wanted to have candidates learn about Netflix culture before they got hired, which sounds like a pretty reasonable idea. So let's go through this little exercise just for fun. So other big tech companies, what might they do if they had that need, right? So first thing that pops into most people's heads is that, oh, we need a website, right? I've got 120 pages of content. I need to go build something to go put all of that in, right? But then I think, well, this culture deck is like, this used to be internal, right? It's only for employees. Maybe there's some, maybe there's some of our secret sauce in there. I don't want to get that out into the world. And then so you kind of go down the road, well, I need to password protect it. I need people to log in before they can see this thing, right? And then once they're logged in, I need to make sure that these potential employees, I need to know how well they absorb that material. So maybe we need to go and put like some quizzes or assessments in there, right? To make sure they really understand what they're getting themselves into. And then once I have all of this data, what do you want to do with it next? Right? I want to tie it back into my HR system, right? So we can build this big system to be able to accomplish that goal, right? So what did Reed Hastings at Netflix decide to do? Super simple. He posted the entire deck publicly on SlideShare. Just put it up there. He didn't even give it to the marketing department. It was raw. You can go look at it right now. It's not super pretty. You saw 3 of the slides from there, no pictures, anything. He put it on there, accomplished his goal. One of the side benefits of putting it on SlideShare was that original deck, they've updated it a lot since then. It's had over 10 million views, and it's being studied. It's still being studied today, by people around the world. Now, as most people study this, they think of it as a case study in, how does culture impact performance, or, how do human beings perform in this type of environment? The case study that I like to think about is, what did Netflix do to solve what is a simple problem with a super simple solution, and what are the results that they got, right? If they would have spent all the time of building what we showed on the other slide, 1, they wouldn't have 10 million views, and 2, they would have wasted, I don't know, 6 months or a year of someone's life to build the thing, okay? And so that's one of the points I want to get across today, is that, you can see that systems, especially simple systems, can have huge results, okay? So systems in general, they help make things repeatable, they help make things more efficient, transferable. Everybody loves this last word, scalable, especially as we're talking about startups. Who has heard this term, do things that don't scale? A couple of 3 people, okay? So there's a guy by the name of Paul Graham. He's one of the co-founders of Y Combinator. He made this term super popular. He would go around and he'd preach this to everybody, every company that came into Y Combinator. And he was, one of the quotes that he says, it's important to get early customers. And that's even if you have to do a ton of work to do it, it's okay. Because the most important thing as a startup is to learn, you've got to go learn what you need to go build to go do all of these, repeatable, more efficient, scalable things. So he would say, do things that don't scale, right? And this terminology has become so popular. There's I can't remember the exact name of the website. There's a website that's dedicated to companies and examples of doing things that don't scale. Here's just a few of them. And it covers everything from Airbnb, the 3 founders of Airbnb. Paul famously told them to, so they're in Southern California. He's like, what are you doing here? You need to be in New York where your customers are. So they flew to New York. They rented a camera. They started taking pictures of people's apartments. Is that scalable? Oh no, but they learned a ton by doing it. So anywhere from that to DoorDash. Founders of DoorDash actually went and did live deliveries, so they're throwing stuff in their hatchback and taking that out to customers. So things that don't scale. And I can't remember where this came from. I was at a event a few weeks ago, and it was a founder from Utah that said this. So we'll attribute this to some unknown founder in Utah. He said, do things 30 times manually before automating. And that kind of speaks to that same principle of doing things that don't scale. And so I did a little twist on that. I think you should do things that don't scale so that you can learn how to scale. So you can learn how to scale. And so with that, what I want to do is invite Jordan from Savology to come and share a little bit about Savology, how it helps, individuals scale with systems, as well as how they've built out their systems. Thanks.
Thank you. I was a little disappointed. I told Joel to actually introduce me as Jordan Potato. Not just because potatoes are awesome, but I feel a little more comfortable when people just laugh. So feel free to laugh throughout this if you want. Let me make sure. I'll try it. Awesome. So again, Jordan Pinedo, head of partnerships at Savology. We're a RevRoad portfolio company. And just like Bruce mentioned, what I'm going to quickly talk about are really 2 things. One, how Savology is very much a system, but how we've put in some systems in our own way to get Savology out to the market. So Savology, what we do is we empower Americans to become financially secure, for them to reach their financial goals and to reach financial wellness. At the multiple companies I've worked at, financial related specifically, I noticed a very common theme. which is that most Americans, most people really struggle with their finances. And for a plethora of reasons. One, the education system doesn't prepare us well enough. Others might be we've just developed some bad habits. And a lot of times it's we just don't know where to go to get started. And so we set out to find a system that would help the masses do just that, get back on track, understand what it is that they need to do, but do it in a very simple manner. And as we went through our journey, we created that system, worked very well. And what we quickly realized was that this is very much financial wellness, or helping people's finances is very much a part of a company as well. A lot of employees want their employer to help them with personal finances. And so that was the big problem that we found, especially as COVID hit. We saw that a lot of companies and people were evaluating kind of their priorities. And these were some of the statistics that we found the problem. There's a reason that finances are consistently cited as people and employees' number one stressor in life. Financially stressed employees miss more work days. There's higher turnover for companies where employees are financially stressed, and most companies predict that it's costing them a lot of money. So that was the big problem that we saw. And so Savology, the way that it was born was the system, again, that we were trying to build to solve that. And through our own research, through a lot of market data, what we found is that financial planning is one of the most effective ways to help people feel better about their finances and do a much better job, actually get to a place where they're making some big differences. So these are a few things that we found through our own research, that people that have a financial plan or goals or a system in place, after just 1 year, already feel better about their finances. So we're already, helping with half the problem, which is just that stress related to finances. And then the other piece is actually producing positive results. Okay. And so Savology, it's a system for financial planning. And this is how it works. So we found that traditional financial planning is not always accessible, can be difficult, not always affordable. And so the way that Savology works is we make it scalable, we make it affordable, and we make it accessible to the masses. And this is exactly how it's done. So someone comes in, they sign up, they build their personalized plan, they get help with financial coaches, financial professionals, they get a report card. But ultimately what it comes down to is we give them very specific action items. So it's very actionable. So for every person, they're going to get action items or these things related to what is it that I should be doing next. So again, it's getting that system, that plan in place, but also saying, here is what we should be doing next. And so as we looked at the employer market, we knew that we needed a different strategy. So up to that point, we had done pretty much everything direct to consumer. And so from a sales perspective, we knew it would take a little bit different angle for us as far as how we were going to do that. And so the question was, where do we get started? What does this sales process or this playbook look like for us? And so we had kind of 4 principles that we based it on when we got started, which have evolved over time. But what I want to share with you are kind of those 4 first principles that we looked at, and not saying that they necessarily are what every company should be doing, but I think these are good places for some companies if they're looking at building a sales process or formalizing that, what it can be done. And I want to go back to one of Bruce's points earlier, which is, I know I put on here, keep it simple and scalable. And right up front, I'll tell you that our sales process when we first started was not scalable because we had to do a lot of things manually, but that was okay. So with keeping it simple and scalable, the first thing is to get it down on paper. Write it down. Document the process of what you think will work. And we loosely based it when we started out on predictable revenue. Anyone here familiar with predictable revenue, the book Predictable Revenue? Okay, we've got a few out there. Sydney back there. Thank you. Well, I didn't write it, so thank you to the author. But we wrote out what we loosely based it on that, but then we also took it from our own experience of selling to a few employers and just getting it out on paper. So it literally took us an hour, 2 hours. It looked terrible, but we put it in a place where we could collaborate. I think that's really important, is putting it in a place where you can collaborate, but also make changes in the future. So we use Notion as like an intranet page. We put it on a page that was shared with all the sales team, or it was basically me and the CEO at that point, and we could go in and discuss and make changes to that. Okay. But what was nice about it was that then we had some steps where we could implement something, because the most important piece was for us to get started and actually start testing that out. So keep it simple, get started, and you'll get to that scalable piece. So the second piece for us was to use the right types of tools. Now, there are thousands of sales tools out there that you can use. Obviously, the first one for us was a CRM, and where we were basing some of that on predictable revenue, we ended up using a CRM called Close. And the reason being was that we knew up front we would need to use email, phone, voicemail, texting, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn was a little bit later on. But what was nice about Close was that for a startup, it was affordable, right? That's always important for us, right? We got to look at costs. And so it was affordable for us. We couldn't just jump straight to Salesforce, which would have been, 5 to 10 times as much as what we were paying for Close. And it contained all the tools that we were needed. It was really nice. We were able to build in some really easy workflows so that we could follow that sales process that we had documented out. It had emailing capabilities in there. And so it basically came as kind of an all-in-one tool that we could use to execute on the sales process that we had built out. So the research, like we went through, we obviously had to find what worked for us. And I think it's different for every company. But it was really easy to get it implemented and for us to start actually, doing some of those things. And what's nice is these all kind of tie in together where we were able to go back, reevaluate the sales process, make those intermittent changes, and actually implement those into the CRM. Okay. So that brings me to my next point, which is to test and iterate. So again, the most important piece is to start executing. Get it on there, start executing, and then we're able to go back easily and say which pieces are working well, which aren't. And word of caution on this one is don't fall into trends and change courses so often. I think early on, I was always finding like the next best thing as far as like sales goes and trying to change and pivot. The problem was it wasn't giving us enough time to really test out what was working and what wasn't. So keep it simple when you're doing testing and iterating. And generally, we would stick to 1 to 2 things. So we would start at the beginning of the sales process, which was prospecting, and say, what is working here and what isn't? Okay, let's look at how we can change a few of those pieces. Once we kind of figured that out, we'd move on and find out any pieces in the sales process that weren't working out for us and how we could iterate that on and test. So don't do too much, but use it wisely so that it's to your benefit and that you're not going to kind of shoot yourself in the foot there. And then last piece is to start automating. And again, caution on this, automate pieces that are not as important or that are not as important for human interaction. So one thing that we found that was hugely important for automating was inbound leads. If we could get in contact with them within 5 minutes, the chance of us getting a call schedule with them went up by about 80%. And so for us, that was huge. So we needed to find a way that when we had an inbound lead come in, we could immediately contact them, whatever hour of the day it was. And so we were able to find an easy system that would integrate into our CRM that made that extremely easy for us. We used Zapier. There's a bunch of tools out there that you can use. But again, with the automation piece, I like the recommendation of do it manually 30 times before you automate or scale it. And I think the reason, part of that as well, is does it actually work? Because there's work put into actually automating something, and you don't want to put work into something that ultimately isn't going to work for you. So it's part of the learning process, but I also think it's learning, is this a piece, if we automate it, is actually going to produce results for us? And then I didn't put it up here, but like, again, I think I've kind of touched on it a few times. For us, the big thing was just get out there and start doing it. That's the best way to learn. It's the best way to start making changes and actually seeing where those changes make differences. So don't spend all your time trying to have the perfect sales process from day one, because it won't be, and you're always going to be changing that. But get something out there and start working on it. Those are really the things that helped us most. So Bruce, do you want me to stay up here?
Cool. Good job, Jordan.
Thanks.
That was fun.